Charles stood at the back of the church, his hands clenched in fists and his jaw tight. The sound of the organ music drifted through the doors, soft and full of promise, but to him, it sounded like a funeral march. Every step the bride took down, that all was a nail in the coffin of what could have been. His eyes burned as he watched her, Vanessa in that stunning white dress, her smile radiant, her arm wrapped around Michael's. The man who wasn't him, the man who had what he gave up. He wasn't invited. He knew he wouldn't be, but that didn't stop him from coming. He had parked down the street, waited until the doors opened, and slipped into the back when no one was looking. Now he stood there like a ghost, watching the woman he once claimed to love walk toward another man. A better man, maybe, or just a man who hadn't made the same mistake Charles had. 3 years ago, Vanessa was everything to him. Smart, kind, loyal, maybe too loyal. She loved him with a fire he didn't know how to handle. She waited on him, forgave him when he forgot birthdays, and stood by him when his life was chaos. And he threw it all away for Lori. Sweet-talking, wild, impulsive Lori. He thought he needed excitement. He thought Vanessa was too safe, too predictable. Lori made him feel alive until she didn't. 6 months into the affair, everything fell apart. Lori didn't want to settle down. She didn't want love, she wanted attention. She wanted the thrill of being chased and the freedom to leave when she got bored. And Charles? He was just the flavor of the month. She broke his heart, not because she cheated, though she did, but because she never loved him. Not like Vanessa had. By the time he realized what he lost, it was too late. Vanessa was gone. Her number changed. Her friends wouldn't talk to him. She vanished like she had never existed. Until a few weeks ago, he saw her at a coffee shop. She looked different, happier, glowing, and beside her was Michael, tall, clean-cut, and clearly in love. They held hands across the table. She didn't see Charles, or maybe she did and just didn't care. Then came the wedding announcement in the paper. His stomach turned when he saw it. Her name, her smile, and Michael's arms wrapped around her waist. It should have been him. He told himself not to go. What good would it do? But something in him needed to see it, needed to see her happy without him, needed the pain to be real. Now as she reached the altar, Charles felt his throat tighten. Michael turned to her with a look that said everything: adoration, pride, devotion, words Charles never gave her, promises he never kept. The ceremony began. Charles stared, frozen, his heart hammering. As the priest spoke, the words blurred together in his head. He didn't hear them. He didn't need to. She said, "I do." And in that moment, something inside him cracked. He turned and walked out. The sun hit his face as he stepped into the street. He didn't know where he was going. He just walked, past the parked cars, past the flower shop with the "Congratulations Vanessa and Michael" sign taped in the window, past the life he would never have. He made it to blocks before his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him pick up. "Charles," a voice said, soft, familiar. He stopped walking. "Vanessa?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "I saw you." His heart dropped. She continued, her voice calm but sharp. "I knew you'd come. I hoped you wouldn't." He didn't know what to say. He tried to find the words but nothing came. "I don't hate you," she said. "I did, for a long time. But now, I just feel sorry for you." He wanted to respond, apologize, beg, something. "But don't call me again," she said quietly. "This is my beginning. Don't drag your ending into it." And just like that, she hung up. Charles stood there for a long time, phone still in hand, heart still trying to catch up with the moment. She was gone, really gone. And this time it was permanent. That night, Charles sat alone in his apartment, staring at the ceiling. The silence was heavy, pressing against his chest like a weight he couldn't lift. He hadn't turned on the lights when he got home. He didn't eat, didn't drink, just sat there in the dark, haunted by her voice, playing it over and over in his head. "This is my beginning. Don't drag your ending into it." The words cut deeper than any argument they ever had. And the worst part, she was right. He got up slowly, grabbed the bottle of scotch from the kitchen cabinet, and poured himself a glass. It tasted like regret. He sank onto the couch and scrolled through his phone, looking for something to distract him. He tapped on Lori's name out of some stupid instinct, his thumb hovering over the call button. Then he stopped. He hadn't spoken to Lori in over a year. Not since their explosive final argument when she laughed in his face after he said he missed Vanessa, told him he was boring and sentimental. Go back to your safe little girl, if she'll even take you, she sneered. Turns out she wouldn't. Charles threw the phone on the couch and leaned forward, burying his face in his hands. He thought about the first time he met Vanessa. She was wearing this ridiculous yellow scarf and holding a stack of books so high it almost toppled over when she sneezed. He caught them for her. She smiled and thanked him with a voice that had more warmth than anyone he'd known in years. He should have known then, but he was selfish. He always thought there would be time to make things right. He never imagined she'd be strong enough to walk away completely, to fall in love again, to move on without him. And now, she was married. He closed his eyes and saw her again at the altar, saying I do with that smile. Not to him. Never to him again. The next few days passed like fog. Charles went to work, but didn't care. He answered emails with one-word replies. His coworkers stopped inviting him to lunch. They whispered behind his back, wondering what was wrong. He didn't explain. How do you tell people that the biggest mistake of your life just walked down the aisle into someone else's arms? Late one night, he found himself outside Lori's apartment. The lights were off, but her car was there. He stared up at the window for a long time, wondering what he even wanted from her. Forgiveness? Closure? Misery shared? Before he could knock, the door opened. Charles? Lori stood in the doorway in a silk robe, holding a glass of wine. Her makeup was smeared, and her hair was a mess. She looked like a version of the past. He was desperate to forget. He didn't speak. She tilted her head and smirked. You look like hell. I know, he said. Let me guess, she said, stepping aside. You went to her wedding. He hesitated, then walked in. The place smelled like stale perfume and something burning in the kitchen. He sat on the edge of the couch while she refilled her wine glass. You always wanted her, she said, plopping down across from him. Even when you were with me. I never stopped loving her, he admitted, his voice low. Lori gave a short laugh. And now she's gone, married, living the fairy tale. While you're here with me. He looked at her. There was no spark left in her eyes, no fire, just a bitter woman clinging to an old version of herself, just like he was. What are we doing, Lori? He asked. Same thing we've always done, she said, sipping her wine, using each other to feel less empty. He stared at her, and for the first time, he saw the truth not about her, but about himself. This wasn't love. This wasn't healing. This was punishment. He stood up. I can't do this anymore. Lori didn't stop him. She just nodded, her smile fading. You never could. As he walked out of her apartment, Charles felt something shift. Not relief, not peace, but maybe the beginning of pain with a purpose. He didn't know what was next, but he knew it wouldn't be this. It was time to face himself. Days turned into weeks, and Charles tried to rebuild something resembling a life. But the truth was, nothing felt real anymore. His apartment was too quiet, his job too hollow, and the city too full of ghosts. Everywhere he went reminded him of her. Vanessa's laugh in that cafe on 5th Street, her favorite flower shop by the park, the bookstore where she once dragged him through every aisle just to find a poetry collection she'd already read twice. The hardest part was knowing she'd moved on for good. Not in theory, not in some vague future, but right now, married, settled, happy. And he was still in the wreckage. He tried therapy, sat in a room with pale walls and a woman named Dr. Hawthorne, who listened more than she spoke. The silence between her questions said more than any advice ever could. Do you believe you deserve forgiveness, Charles? She asked once, her pen resting on her knee. He didn't answer, not because he didn't know, but because deep down, he didn't think he did. He started jogging at night, not for health, not really, just to exhaust himself enough to sleep. The same loop every evening, down Market Street, through the park, past the church. He always paused when he passed the steps where he saw her wedding. He didn't know why. Maybe to feel the sting. Maybe to remind himself what regret really looked like. One night, it rained. Hard. The kind of rain that soaked you through in minutes. He ran anyway. Let it wash over him. Let it numb everything. When he stopped under the street lamp near the church steps, he looked up and saw someone standing there. Vanessa. He froze. She had an umbrella in one hand, her hair wet at the edges, and she wore no makeup. Just jeans, a sweater, and that yellow scarf, the same one from the day they met. he didn't speak. He thought maybe he was hallucinating, the universe playing one more cruel joke on him. But then she smiled. Not the warm, familiar smile he remembered. This one was tired, careful. "I thought I might see you here," she said. His heart thudded. "Why would you come back?" "I'm not here to stay," she said. "I just needed to say something." He swallowed hard. "Vanessa, I'm sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything." But she shook her head. "I'm not here for that. I'm not angry anymore, Charles. I'm not hurt. I forgave you a long time ago." He blinked, stunned. She continued. "But I also realized something. I was never the one you needed to apologize to. You've been doing that to yourself every day. I just came to tell you, let it go." "How?" he asked, barely above a whisper. "You loved me. You hurt me. And now you're learning to live without me. That's the price. But it's also the path forward." He looked at her, her face calm in the rain. There was no bitterness, no blame, just a woman who had survived him and then risen beyond him. "You happy?" he asked, his voice cracking. She nodded. "I am." He smiled through the ache. "Good." They stood there in silence, rain tapping on the pavement around them. Then she said, "This was goodbye, Charles. For real this time." He nodded. "I know." She turned and walked away. And unlike before, he didn't chase her daddy as the rain soaked into his clothes and ran down his face. He finally understood some stories don't end with second chances. Some end with someone walking away and the other learning to let them. He stood there until the street emptied again. The city kept moving. The lights flickered on. Somewhere, someone else was falling in love. And for the first time in years, Charles didn't feel broken, just unfinished. The next morning, Charles woke up to sunlight on his face and the strange feeling that something had shifted inside him. It wasn't peace exactly. It wasn't joy. But it also wasn't that familiar heaviness that had been sitting in his chest. Since Vanessa walked out of his life, he sat up slowly, rubbed his eyes, and looked around the apartment. Same worn-out furniture, same dull beige walls, but it didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like a place he could start over. He brewed coffee and opened the window. For once, the city didn't seem like it was mocking him with its noise and chaos. He watched people walk by, laughing, arguing, running late, holding hands, all of them tangled in their own stories, unaware of his. And maybe that was okay. Later that day, he stopped by his old friend Thomas's studio. Thomas was a photographer, always surrounded by canvases and chaos. They hadn't spoken much since the fallout with Vanessa. Charles had isolated himself from most people, embarrassed by the choices he made. But now, for some reason, he felt ready to reconnect. "Holy shit," Thomas said when he opened the door. "The ghost lives." Charles smiled faintly. "Got any coffee?" They sat for hours talking about nothing and everything. Thomas didn't press him about Vanessa, didn't ask about Lori, just let him be. And it felt good, normal. "You should come to the gallery this weekend," Thomas said. "New exhibit. It's about starting over. Thought of you when I saw it." Charles raised an eyebrow. "Is that a compliment or an insult?" "Both." Thomas grinned. He went. He stood in the middle of the gallery on Friday night, surrounded by strangers and art and the low hum of conversation. He looked at one photo, an old man walking away from a burning house. No fear on his face, just calm. It felt like his life, in a single image. Then someone beside him spoke. "Makes you think, doesn't it?" He turned and saw a woman standing there. She was tall, with curly auburn hair and dark green eyes. She looked to be around his age, wore a leather jacket and carried a sketchbook under one arm. "It does," Charles said. "Feels like leaving behind everything you thought mattered." The woman smiled. "Or finally realizing you survived it." He nodded. "I'm Claire," she said, holding out her hand. "Charles." They shook hands. It lingered a second longer than necessary. Claire stayed near him the rest of the night. They talked about art, movies, music. She asked him what he did for a living. He gave her the bare version. She didn't pry, didn't push, just laughed at his dry jokes and listened like he still had something worth saying. When the gallery started closing, she glanced at the door, then at him. "You want to grab a drink?" He hesitated. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was something else, a question in his own heart. Was he ready? He looked at her. The easy confidence, the openness in her smile, the lack of expectation. "Sure," he said. "Let's go." They ended up at a quiet bar around the corner. tucked into a booth with dim lighting and the smell of old wood. She sipped a whiskey neat. He stuck with beer. At some point in the conversation, she asked, "So, what broke your heart?" He looked at her, surprised. "What makes you think it was broken?" Claire gave a small smile. "It's in your eyes. That tired kind of sadness." He didn't lie. He told her about Vanessa. Not every detail, but enough. The love, the betrayal, the regret, the wedding, the goodbye. Claire listened without judgment. When he was done, she simply said, "You still love her?" He shook his head. "I think I always will, but not in the way I used to. Not in the way that hopes for anything." She nodded like she understood. "Then maybe you're almost ready to start again." And something about the way she said it, soft, steady, not rushed, made him believe it. The weeks that followed felt like unfamiliar territory for Charles. Every step forward came with the urge to look back, like muscle memory refusing to let go. But with Claire, things were different. She never asked for more than he could give, never tried to fix him, never flinched at the silences. She had her own kind of quiet pain beneath her humor, though she never shared the full story. He didn't press. They existed in a strange, gentle understanding to people with pasts that still echoed. Learning how to speak in present tense again, they started seeing each other regularly. Coffee on Wednesdays, dinner on Fridays, long walks on Sundays through the old parts of the city. Once, they found an old record shop with warped floorboards and a cat that sat on the jazz section like a guardian of secrets. Claire laughed when Charles tripped over a loose tile, then slipped a Nina Simone record into his hand and said, "Take this home. It sounds like rain and regret. You'll love it." He did. One Friday evening, as they sat on Claire's rooftop watching the city lights flicker against the purple dusk, she turned to him and said, "You're different now from when we met." Charles glanced at her. "In a good way?" She shrugged. "In a real way." He took a deep breath. "I was angry for a long time. At Vanessa, at myself, at how easy it was for her to let go." Claire nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. "It probably wasn't easy. It just looked like it." He didn't respond right away. Then he said, "She gave me every chance to be better, and I chose wrong." "You chose what you weren't ready to let go of," Claire said. "We all do sometimes." He looked at her, really looked. "What did you choose?" Claire smiled, faintly. "Someone who loved the idea of me but couldn't stand the reality." Charles stared down at the rooftop ledge, picking at a crack in the stone. "So now what?" "Now?" She leaned back on her elbows. "You let yourself stop bleeding over people who aren't cutting you anymore." The words settled into him like warm air in a cold room. A few days later, Vanessa reached out. Just a message, short, simple. "I saw you at the gallery in the paper. You looked well. I hope you are." It wasn't an invitation to talk. It was a soft farewell, one last bridge between what they were and what they would never be again. He stared at the message for a long time before replying, "Thank you. I'm getting there. I hope you're still happy." She didn't answer, and he didn't expect her to. That silence, for once, didn't feel cruel. It felt finished. That same evening, Claire showed up with paint on her fingers and a bottle of red wine. She had just finished a mural downtown, and her face lit up when she talked about it. She threw her jacket on the back of the chair and walked straight to the record player. "Put on Simone," she said. "The one that sounds like rain." He smiled and set the record spinning. The music floated through the room like memory softened by time. Claire danced barefoot across the hardwood floor, half singing along, off-key but fearless. "Dance with me," she said, holding out a hand. He hesitated. His heart wasn't completely healed. There were still cracks, still pieces of Vanessa lodged in the corners of his mind. But he was tired of standing still. So he took her hand. She laughed as they spun in lazy circles, the wine forgotten on the counter, the world falling away for a little while. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a movie scene, but it was honest. As the music slowed, Claire leaned her head against his shoulder. "You know," she whispered, "sometimes the second story is better than the first." And maybe it was. Maybe this time, he'd write it right. Autumn crept in quietly, painting the city in shades of rust and gold. Charles found comfort in the change. It matched the quiet shifts inside him. Things weren't perfect. Not even close. But for the first time in years, he wasn't surviving. He was participating. There were still days where the past reached up and tugged at him, but they were fewer now, softer. He and Claire fell into a rhythm that didn't feel forced. She didn't ask him to define what they were, and he didn't pretend to have all the answers. They just were. A shared morning at the farmer's market. A late night curled up on the couch watching old black and white films. Text messages that weren't loaded with need, just little check-ins like, "The sky looks like spilled ink tonight. Thought you'd want to know." One Saturday, they took a road trip out of the city, no destination, just gas in the tank and music loud enough to drown out the past. Somewhere between a diner with burnt coffee and a lookout point over the valley, they found themselves parked under a canopy of trees, watching the wind scatter leaves like confetti. Claire sat on the hood of the car, legs crossed, sketching the trees in her notebook. Charles leaned against the bumper, sipping from a thermos she'd brought along. She looked up suddenly and said, "Do you still think about her?" He didn't flinch. "Sometimes." Claire nodded, unfazed. "That's fair. But not the way I used to," he added. "It's like, the ache is dull now, and when I think of her, it's not pain, just a memory I lived through." Claire closed her notebook. "You're healing." He looked at her. "And you? What are you healing from?" She hesitated, then said, "A man who promised the world and gave me a closet." He furrowed his brow. "That's oddly specific." Claire laughed softly. "It is. He wanted me to shrink, be smaller, quieter, less of everything that made me me. And did you?" "For a while," she said, her voice fading, "until I couldn't breathe anymore." Charles moved beside her and touched her hand gently. "You're a lot, Claire, but in the best way." She turned toward him, her eyes locking with his. "You're not afraid of me being a lot?" He shook his head. "I was afraid of someone loving me too well. That's what scared me before." She didn't kiss him then. Instead, she leaned her head on his shoulder and sat quietly. That moment, without urgency, without performance, felt more intimate than anything he'd known in years. Back in the city, their lives stayed separate but close. Charles focused on work again, finally accepting a promotion he'd been putting off. The office noticed the change. He was more focused, more grounded, less bitter. One evening, Thomas called him. "Hey man," Thomas said, "you've been off the grid. Still seeing that artist girl?" "Yeah," Charles replied. "Claire." Thomas chuckled. "Good. You seem not miserable." "That's new." Charles laughed. "Thanks, I think." Then Thomas said something unexpected. "Vanessa came by the studio last week." That hit harder than he expected. "Really?" "Yeah, just to see the exhibit. She didn't ask about you." Charles paused. "She doesn't need to." There was a quiet on the line. Then Thomas said, "She looked happy, man. Like, deep happy." "I'm glad," Charles said. And this time, he meant it. No bitterness, no tightness in his chest. That night, Claire came over with a bag of groceries and a wild idea to make homemade pasta. Charles ruined the first batch and burned the garlic. They ended up ordering takeout and eating it on the kitchen floor, laughing over wine and cheap noodles. A tea. One point, she looked at him seriously and said, "You ever think we met too late?" He thought about that, about timing, about mistakes, about all the roads that had to collapse to bring them here. "No," he said finally. "I think we met when we were ready." And when she leaned in to kiss him, slow and certain, he didn't pull away, not this time. Winter rolled in with biting wind and gray skies, but Charles didn't mind the cold like he used to. Not this year. He found warmth in small things now. Claire's scarf draped over the chair, the clink of mugs in the morning, the way her laughter filled the room even on the worst days. Life wasn't dramatic anymore. It wasn't a soap opera of heartbreak and regrets. It was real, steady, and strangely beautiful in its simplicity. Still, the past had a way of showing up when you least expected it. It was a Tuesday when Charles ran into Michael. He hadn't planned on going to that bookstore, he was just ducking in to escape the snow. He didn't see Michael at first. Not until he turned into the travel section and nearly bumped into him. Michael looked exactly the same, polished, calm, kind-eyed. There was a brief, uncomfortable pause. "Charles?" Michael said with a nod, his tone polite. "Michael," Charles replied. He half expected tension, maybe even a punch. But Michael simply slid the book he was holding back onto the shelf. "I didn't know you still lived around here," Michael said. "Didn't know you read about Portugal," Charles replied dryly, nodding toward the book. Michael chuckled. "Vanessa wants to go next summer. Honeymoon Part 2. There it was. Charles felt it hit him, not jealousy, but something like the final twist of a key turning in a locked door. "Sounds like a good trip," he said. Michael studied him for a moment, then said, She saw a photo of you and someone. Claire? Charles nodded. Yeah, Claire. She looks happy, Michael said. You do too. That caught him off guard. Thanks, Charles said, unsure what else to offer. Michael hesitated before speaking again. I never said it before, but I know what happened between you and Vanessa wasn't simple. I didn't mean to step into the middle of it. You didn't, Charles replied. I stepped out of it long before you stepped in. Michael nodded. Still, I didn't want you to think I gloated. You didn't have to, Charles said. I did that to myself. There was another pause. Then Michael offered his hand. Charles stared at it for a beat, then took it. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't friendship, but it was closure. That evening, Charles told Claire about the run-in. She didn't react with suspicion or jealousy. She just listened, her head resting on his chest while they lay on the couch in a heap of blankets. You okay? She asked. I think I am, he said honestly. He expected her to push, to ask more, but Claire just traced a slow line across his arm and whispered, Good. You deserve to be. As the weeks passed, their lives became even more entwined. Charles met her friends, helped her paint a massive mural on the side of a community center. She started leaving things at his place without asking: books, scarves, a chipped mug she loved. He didn't mind. In fact, he found himself looking for them when she wasn't around. One night, they were walking home in the snow, bundled up and laughing about something stupid, an argument about who had better taste in pizza, when she stopped suddenly. What if we didn't do the slow thing anymore? She said. Charles blinked. What do you mean? I mean, she said, her breath puffing clouds into the cold air. What if we started building something real? He stared at her, snowflakes catching in her hair, cheeks flushed red from the wind. We already are. I mean all the way, Charles, she said, softer now. I'm not asking for forever in a box with a bow. I just want to know if you're ready to stop holding back. He thought of Vanessa, of Lori, of all the wasted chances and broken moments. Then he looked at Claire, alive here, waiting, but not begging. I am, he said. I really am. And he meant it. By spring, Claire had officially moved in. There wasn't some big announcement or dramatic moment, it just happened naturally. Her sketchbooks filled his shelves, her tea collection took over an entire kitchen drawer, and one day, he realized his closet had more of her sweaters than his shirts. But he didn't feel invaded. He felt settled, like his apartment had finally stopped echoing. The first weekend after she moved in, they hosted a small dinner with Claire's friends. Charles had never really liked groups. He always felt a little on the outside, a little unsure of his place. But that night, as he watched her laugh at something her friend Julia said and pass plates of food like she'd lived in that kitchen forever, he felt something strange bloom in his chest. Belonging. He poured wine, cracked a few jokes that actually landed. And by the end of the night, Claire leaned in and whispered, You're killing it, chef. I didn't even cook, exactly. You've improved. After everyone left and the dishes were piled high, they didn't clean up right away. They just sat on the floor, legs stretched out, backs against the cabinet, and drank what was left in the bottle. Claire tilted her head and studied him for a while. You look different. How so? Lighter. Charles smirked. Probably the wine. No, she said. Like someone who stopped blaming the mirror. He didn't respond at first. Then he said, I used to think pain was punishment, for messing up, for not being good enough. But now, I think maybe pain is just the debt we pay to learn something. She gave a soft smile. And what have you learned, Charles? He took her hand, fingers laced through hers, and replied that some endings are really beginnings, and not all regrets are meant to be carried forever. She kissed him then, long, unrushed, like she agreed without needing to say it. A few weeks later, Vanessa reached out again. This time it was a letter. It came in a cream-colored envelope, her name written in the same neat handwriting he used to know so well. Claire was out running errands when he opened it. He read it at the kitchen table, heart pounding, hands steady. Charles, I wasn't sure if I should write this. I don't expect a reply. I don't even know what I want you to feel. But I do know I've thought of you lately, not with pain, not with bitterness, just with understanding. When I married Michael, I felt peace, but also grief. Grief for what we were, and what we never could be. You hurt me. That won't ever be erased. But you also taught me a lot about myself, about what I deserved. I'm happy now. Really happy. I think you are too, or close to it. I saw you and Claire that day at the park. You were laughing so hard you didn't notice me. And it made me smile, not out of spite, just because I always hoped you'd find someone who could meet you where I couldn't. We were not meant to last, Charles, but we mattered. I hope you remember that. Wishing you more than peace, wishing you joy. Vanessa. He sat there for a long time after finishing it. He didn't cry, didn't feel torn open. Instead, he felt something close, gently, like the soft click of a door finally shutting after years of creaking open. When Claire came home, she found him in the kitchen, dinner half prepped, music playing low. You okay? She asked. Reading the look on his face, he smiled. Yeah, I'm actually really okay. She kissed him on the cheek and began helping with the food. No questions asked. That night, as they sat down to eat, Charles looked across the table and thought about the long, twisted road that had brought him here through mistakes and heartbreak and every kind of loneliness. He didn't want to go back. Not anymore. And for the first time in his life, he realized he wasn't haunted. He was home. Summer came with warmth that wrapped the city in a slow, golden hush. Mornings stretched out longer, nights felt softer. Life moved at a gentler pace, and Charles let himself lean into it without hesitation. No more apologies, no more reliving the past. He had mourned the old version of himself long enough. Now, all that mattered was the life he was choosing every single day with Claire. They took a trip to the coast in late June, just the two of them. No plans, no pressure. They rented a quiet little cottage near the water, the kind with squeaky floors and salty air that hung thick on the windowsills. Claire brought her paints, Charles brought books he wouldn't read, and the rest they left behind. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the ocean and cast a warm amber across the sand, Claire stood barefoot near the edge of the shore, her hair tangled by the wind. She looked over her shoulder at him and smiled in that lopsided, teasing way she did when she was about to say something meaningful but act like it was nothing. You ever think about getting married again? She asked, her voice light. He blinked. The question wasn't heavy, but it landed like a stone dropped gently into still water. I used to think I didn't deserve to, he said honestly, walking up beside her. And now? He looked out at the waves, then back at her. Now I think maybe I just didn't know what it meant. Claire nodded slowly. It's not a cure, you know. I know, he said. It's a promise. Not to be perfect, just to try. She reached for his hand, linking their fingers like it was the most natural thing in the world. You're not afraid I'll walk away one day? He shook his head. If you do, it won't be because I gave up. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Good answer. They didn't talk about it again, not in the formal sense. No rings, no big speech. But when they returned to the city, they started looking for a new place together. Something neither of them had lived in before. A space that belonged to them both, from scratch. Weeks passed. The world kept moving, and so did they. Charles got promoted again, but this time, he didn't chase it like validation. It was just work. It wasn't who he was anymore. Claire had her first solo art show. The gallery was packed, and Charles stood at the back, watching her glow in front of the crowd, talking about her work like it was her heartbeat. One of the pieces was of a man standing in the rain, alone, head tilted back as if to let it soak through him. Someone beside him whispered, "That one hits hard." Charles smiled. Yeah, it really does. Later that night, back home, Claire pulled the painting from the back of her car and handed it to him. For you, she said simply. He looked at it again, this time up close. In the bottom right corner was a tiny inscription in Claire's handwriting. To the man who finally stopped chasing storms. Charles felt something in his throat tighten. He didn't need to say thank you. She already knew. A few months later, they had a small ceremony in the park. Nothing flashy, no big crowd, just a handful of friends, soft music and sunlight filtering through the leaves. Claire wore a deep green dress, barefoot, a daisy tucked behind her ear. Charles wore a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, nerves in his stomach, but none in his heart. They wrote their own vows. Claire's were short, irreverent, a little funny, deeply true. Charles's were simple. I've loved wrong before. I've lived blind before. But today, I see you, Claire. And I choose you not because I need saving or because I'm afraid to be alone, but because life makes more sense with you beside me. They kissed, laughed through tears, and walked down the aisle with nothing but possibilities ahead of them. And somewhere in the city, in a different life entirely, Vanessa folded up the wedding announcement and smiled quietly to herself. full of peace, no resentment in her heart. Charles never forgot what came before. He just didn't live there anymore. He had finally learned. That regret wasn't meant to be a place. It was only meant to be a road, and now he had found his way home. The end.